All right, everyone. A couple days ago, there were draconian headlines. Oxford bans students from clapping, and that's half true. Oxford University is not banning students from clapping in favor of jazz hands, which is a really goofy practice. The socialist convention there that everyone was lampooning so often, that featured please don't clap, please only jazz hands, because trigger warnings. They're just encouraging them not to. They're saying to be inclusive and not trigger anybody, please don't make clapping noises. It might trigger someone's anxiety. As somebody who, after my overdose, experiences, in crowded areas, a combination of social anxiety and general panic attacks, I can say I would never ask other people in a setting where generally people clap. I would never go to an auditorium and watch something where I expected people to be clapping constantly. And I would probably buck up and fucking deal with it if it were something important enough where I had to, like, my graduation or something. What are they going to do? Ask all the parents, and next class graduates from Oxford. They're going to say, please only use jazz hands. Your great-grandpa there, by the way, watching, totally knows what that is and why it's important to some of these special snowflakes. How are you going to function in the real world, in an actual real-world setting, if you've been taught that other people have to bend over backwards in this particular manner? It's the idea of reasonable accommodation. For example, wheelchair ramp accessibility for businesses. You have a business, people who are disabled, and some of them it's temporary, they broke their leg or something, they're in a wheelchair for a while, they get crutches. There's a ramp there to allow them to access, as everyone else does, that good or that service. It's reasonable accommodation. It's a ramp. Anyone else can use it too. It's just sort of a kindly thing to do. It just sort of makes sense the way that that's set up for public buildings, schools, and stuff like that. It's a reasonable accommodation. It is not reasonable to suspect that a human behavior that has been practiced for an extended period of time virtually cross-culturally across the world, which is the idea of clapping, that is accepted by 99.9% of people as the way that you sort of congratulate or applaud when you're in one of these public settings, for that to be suspended because a couple of people might get triggered. And most of the time, the people claiming that are just trying to get attention. Don't fucking try to fool me and act as though the average person, upon hearing clapping, starts rocking back and forth and moaning about the voices in their heads. It's not a reasonable accommodation. It also doesn't make any fucking sense at all. If you've got social anxiety or panic attacks, it's not the only trigger that's going to occur. How do you go outside? On a crowded street, suddenly car backfires, someone honks the horn, somebody shouts at their neighbor, something breaks in an alleyway or something. How do you go through life at that point without chronically breaking down on a regular basis? Again, I will use myself as an anecdote. I have had social anxiety for my entire life. I don't like social situations. I don't like social situations in which there isn't a strict hierarchy, where somebody is clearly leading a conversation. It makes me feel confused. I don't like that feeling, so I tend to avoid it. I don't like crowds. I don't like cities. I don't like society, and by and large, I don't like humanity. I don't have any problem. I like my fans and stuff like that. That's fine. I'm not trying to throw shade on anyone. But by and large, I prefer animals over humans largely because they're more predictable and they tend to be nicer. It's easier to deal with them than it is humans. Humans can suddenly go crazy and start attacking one another in a moment's notice. No shit, it's a little bit nerve-wracking for anyone intelligent enough to understand that. I'm not exactly a people person, which is hilarious given the nature of my work. It's also funny, my lowest scores, when they gave that comprehensive exam, I can't remember what it was called, like in 7th grade, my lowest score was in editing, which is really funny because I do that as a living now too. I mean, the contradictions are constant. But I've got social anxiety disorder, and yes, I've had panic attacks in the past. They've by and large gone away now. Can't remember, it's been probably over a year since that's happened because, time heals all wounds. And you get over it, you have no choice, you have to live in the world. But apparently these people at Oxford, through various means, they can't get on with it. They can't live in the real world. You're not going to be at Oxford forever. You're not always going to be in the ivory tower situation with other people who take sensitivity training when they fart on a commuter train. That's not going to happen. You're going to go out there into a world in which a lot of people, they don't follow that convention. They're like, why are you sitting there rocking back and forth because I'm clapping? Fucking deal with it. I mean, how are you going to get a date? That's going to be something. That'll go along really smoothly. It's going to be really funny. I think the fact that it's happening at a high-ranking institution here is, number one, not surprising, but number two, rather sad. It always seems to happen at it's always Harvard or Oxford. It's never Castleton State University. Diversity hiring workshop. We're going to teach you that if your employees don't look like a bag of fucking mixed up M&Ms and Skittles, then there's something wrong with you. Doesn't make any sense. World's nuts. And suggestions like this that treat non-problems, why aren't you trying to gear all of the intellect that you have at Oxford towards something that matters, like figuring out a way to clean up trash, or stop the deforestation of the Amazon, or stop a war somewhere? Maybe prevent genocides or witch burnings, lynchings. Why don't you do something about the HIV epidemic? Why don't you take care of some orphans? Why don't you do what Rand Paul does and give free eye surgery to third worlders? Why don't you do something that actually demonstrably matters for a group of people that isn't extremely limited and by and large populated by special snowflakes taking advantage of it to get attention? I'm sorry, but the average person, again, panic attacks and anxiety disorder, they're not strangers to me, and yet I can go into a crowd, people start clapping, it doesn't trigger me to the point where I'm not capable of dealing with life. If it does to you, I'm really sorry about that. I realize educational institutions tend to be set up for extroverts, not for introverts. In the most literal sense, from day one when you enter schooling, it's all about being around crowds, participation, groupthink, and things like that. By the way, I hated that aspect of education. The academics loved it. I didn't mind taking tests. I didn't mind reading books and stuff like that. Hated having to, like when you sit around in the first day of class and you're like, we're going to go around and tell each other our names and 3 things about ourselves. And it's like this feel-good hippie bullshit nonsense. It's like, leave me alone. I'm here to read books. This is English class, not social science. Not socialize with other people who I don't know anything about them. I'm probably not going to be friends with most of them, if any of them. Maybe they fucking all hate me completely. Why should I tell them my name and have to work with them? Like when you get graded on group work, that's the most annoying thing ever. Usually what would end up happening is I would just do it all myself. I would just sit in a corner and do it anyway while other people were being dumb and talking to each other. Because I'm just like, I'm not even going to deal with it. I'm not even going to ask them to do any of the work because I know I can do it myself. We'll get a better grade. They'll cheer about it or something, and then we'll go back to pretending I don't exist. I thought it was pretty fun. I had an okay time in school. I just didn't like socializing. For obvious reasons, including the fact that people make up crazy bullshit like this. Jazz hands. What is jazz hands anyway? I think it's when you like go like this, and it's very, very strange to me. Like, honestly, if a group of people around me started doing that all together, it would freak me out way more than if they were clapping. I can't be the only person who feels that way. That's about all. Peace out.